Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode number 276. Today, Vic and myself are joined by the one and only Gary Rogowski of the Northwest Woodworking Studio. Gary talks about teaching post-COVID online, and we discuss any and all things about lumber hoarding and using rope for clamps and how important are different aspects of a mortise and tenon joint. Great show in store for you. I want to let everyone know before we get started, on October 20th, the Panorouter folks are going to be doing a webinar with us, and they're going to be showing 3 new ways that they've come up with to kind of take your joinery to the next level, accessories and jigs that you can add to a Panorouter. So head on over to findwoodworking.com/webinars and sign up for that webinar with Panorouter, and I'll see you there. All right, on with the show after a word from our sponsors. Regardless of your skill level in woodworking or home repair, you want a glue that you can trust. Because a glue that doesn't work can ruin any project in a hurry. Fortunately, Titebond has the glue you need to get the job done with confidence. From interior glues with strong initial tack and short clamp times, to exterior glues with exceptional strength and water resistance, look to Titebond for the right glue for your next project. For more information, visit titebond.com, Titebond.com. Gary, you had just, before we start rolling, you're set up with your Wi-Fi in your new shop, your new small shop and everything. You're teaching online classes out there too. Vic teaches online classes.
Yeah.
Everybody's teaching online classes. What's this Brave New World like for you these days, Gary?
That happens to be the name of my folder, Brave New World. Seriously. Like, I don't know. The world changed.
Yeah.
And, I mean, a couple of years ago, when 20,
Might have heard of it.
Yeah. When everything, I shut down March 15th, 2020. So I had to make changes, and I started doing online classes fairly quickly. And then I converted my mastery program, my 2-year program, and increased enrollment by a factor of 6. I'm not very good at math, but I think that's good.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, it's been great.
But was the transition hard for you? Like from, being able to hold a piece of wood in front of somebody and say, look at this, to look at your screen.
Oh, that's been, I tell you, the harder transition was, did they get that joke? Because nobody's laughing.
Is it latency, or am I just not funny anymore?
This is good material. That has always worked. And I'm getting nothing. Because
I found that too, Gary. The jokes, I don't know, for some reason on the screen, they're not the same. I don't know if the delivery comes off differently or not, but because I consider myself to be quite hilarious.
Yes.
But I know that you are as well, having met you in the past. I mean, your jokes are good material. And if it's falling flat, I can only assume it's the internet.
What am I doing wrong?
Right.
Yeah, well, most of the students are muted, except the ones who should be muted, who are sitting there farting and, moving around all over there. So, but yeah, it's a real challenge to see how someone is holding their chisel. Because most of the time what they do is this. I'm going to demonstrate what my students do. I'm going to go to work at my bench.
And then they get up and they walk out of frame.
Nice view, huh? Come on.
Yeah, so
they don't bring the camera with them.
Wait for Gary to put his headphones. Is that part of it? Are you having to say, hey, can you move your laptop so that I can see the chisel angle, Yeah,
I think I'm going to be talking about how to use both camera and iPhone to give me better views. But the feedback loops are just terrible, as you know. So
I find that students that I have that are sort of because I teach one-on-one only. And so I find that the students that are the best are the ones that actually invest in that. And so they have like a camera or two, and they figured out how to be able to basically broadcast from 2 different cameras so that I can see their bench and what they're doing. And then, so that sort of thing, I think. But yeah, when you're in a group environment, cause I've done some group stuff as well, like, Yeah, I mean, like some people's microphones are on when they shouldn't be. Some people are, you can see that they're working on another something while you're talking.
Oh yeah,
it's like ultimately, it's like, listen, you paid money to be here. If you want to crochet while you're doing that, I mean, fill your boots, but at least whittle or something,
It doesn't bother me to see somebody working because, my classes in the mastery program run 3 hours. Okay. And one of my students was a PhD teaching one of the University of California programs. And he said that they had tested students to see about their, their focus, how long they could stay focused, their attention span. And it went from something like 20 minutes down to 5 in the last decade. So, and I'm expecting people to go, sorry, are you on your, are you checking? Where's your spinner? On his phone. Where's your spinner?
It's so true. Like trying to keep people's attention is like, and they always complain about kids. And I've done some classes like hands-on, like in-person classes with a few kids, like 10 and 12-year-olds. And I'll tell you what, like anybody who says those kids can't sit and pay attention, I mean, I think they're just not offering them something to sit and pay attention to.
I think that's it. Yeah, I really do. I think that's really it. When you get them excited about stuff.
Oh yeah.
They're like, wow, this is cool. And they don't
when
care.
You're building siege engines, you know what I mean? Like when you're building a trebuchet, like you're paying attention.
Absolutely. I can use this on my brother's room.
That's right. Yeah.
I could have used one of those. Yeah. But the attention span is an issue and you just have to live with it. I mean, there are some things that have been taken away, the immediacy of, looking over your shoulder going, hey, everyone, come over here. Yeah. Look what Ben just did. This was really great. And then the same thing, if someone's made a mistake, you get, and you're not trying to pick on them, but well, if Vic were my student, I would pick on him. But look how Vic did this and see the results. But you can't do that. And that was a big part of my teaching. I would just kind of wander around from bench to bench. So that's gone. The flip side is that there is, you have this incredible library at your fingertips. Everyone does. And so you can go, let's look up a piece in the Metropolitan Museum of Art collection and talk about, marquetry. This is marquetry. And I go, I'm not doing that. But yeah, so there's this whole encyclopedia that we have at our fingertips, and that's great. That's fun.
Yeah, I think it just takes everyone a little bit of time to come around, but obviously you've got it figured out. I know Vic has been cranking through a one-on-one, but you were doing group classes for a little bit, weren't you, Vic?
Yeah, I did. I would do project classes usually as a group option, or sort of the more fundamental stuff. So, sharpening or setting up a hand plane or, those sorts of things. Those were okay to do as a group thing because a lot of times they would just simply watch and then we would give them access to the video afterwards. So then when they were in their workbench, with their planes, they could sort of watch it back and all that other stuff. So, but there wasn't that need for sort of immediate feedback, because what I would basically do is do 2 to 3 hours worth of demonstration, let's say on a project. And then they would have access to the video immediately. And then they would go to and then they'd be off for a week doing their own thing. Mm-hmm. The other thing I did was I would set up a WhatsApp group, basically between all the members of that classroom and myself, and then basically could hold office hours. So, they could message with questions. And the nice thing about that is that if, student A had a question, well, all the students saw the question and all the students get the answer, which, to what Gary is saying, when you used to bring everybody in to someone's bench and say, hey, he messed this up and here's how you can not do it, or this is really well done, this is what you're after, so but again, the immediacy of the feedback and all of that is sort of still wanting, I think. But in the end, like kind of Gary alluded to, this is the world changed. And so you could either like stomp your feet and be upset about it, or you can just kind of soldier on and figure it out.
Well, and I mean, I know for us, we never did remote podcasts before. And now it's kind of status quo. And now we've got somebody on the West Coast and somebody up in Canada, and it makes the show all the better for us. You know, we had to totally change, and it was forced by COVID, obviously. Right. But here y'all are able to reach different people in different markets and time zones, and that you probably never would have been able to reach out to before. Yeah. So there's definitely an upside.
Yeah, on the whole, I think it's a positive thing, and it allows us, you and I, Vic, to reach a greater audience. And I used to have people travel, and now there's none of that. But I don't have the space any longer. So
yeah, you went from 10,000 square feet to 600.
Yeah, I got to build a shop, but I mean, I have a little space, to get started. And I was in there yesterday, and I did something fun, and that was great. So, but my big machines, I have a 36-inch bandsaw that I took to a friend's farm, and I think I'm going to have trouble getting that away from him.
Little Bandy went to the farm, Joey.
He grew up. So, we'll see.
Gary, one of the other benefits that the sort of online teaching thing I think brings is that, because you had mentioned, in the old days, pre-COVID, you used to have to travel to go to classes and stuff like that. So, if I were to come out and take a class with you, like, there's my travel costs plus room and board plus the cost of the course and everything else. Yeah. And I mean, the reality is that I think now in a lot of cases, if you're doing stuff online, I can learn from Gary Rogowski and not have to do the travel and the room and board and all that other stuff. So I lose a little bit of the sort of like the being there, being in the space and being abused in person. But what that means is that if, I'm in a certain sort of socioeconomic position, this is going to allow, this is like a barricade being removed for me. Right.
Yeah, I think so.
All of a sudden you've got people who maybe, to take a 1 week course, at somewhere like Rosewood, let's say, tuition's $1,000 plus your travel plus this, you're probably talking about a $2,000, $3,000 week.
And plus a week of vacation time if you're lucky enough.
Right, exactly.
And if you're not,
that's expensive.
You're missing out.
Yeah,
that's expensive.
It's like going to a football game.
Yeah, pretty close. Pretty close.
But yeah, I get your point. And with prices going up on the cost of everything, it makes it even more expensive and difficult. So yeah, it's good.
Let's answer some questions. We've got a few to get through. Do y'all have any favorites? I was going to start with the mortise one because that was pretty juicy.
What's a stanchion bookcase?
Because I just read it because
read the question.
I looked that up and I went, huh? Okay.
All right, this one's from Justin. I'm currently building a wall-mounted stanchion-style bookshelf desk. In my head, that is rails mounted on the wall and everything hangs off the side of it, almost like what Anissa made a couple of years ago, like a modular
mid-century modern type.
That's what
situation.
That's what I'm basing it off of in my head. And I was thinking about tenon lengths, as one may do when there are 27 mortise and tenon joints to cut, fit, and draw bore.
27, that's it?
27 is a weird number, though, because you got...
It is.
Yeah, that's not divisible by 4 or 2. What's going on? Okay.
It's divisible by 9, however.
I know, but 3.
3 is the magic number. 3 is the magic number.
4 is too much. 5 is way out.
And
5 is magic. 5 is magic.
Yeah.
But 1 is the loneliest number.
Sorry, Ben. Get through the question, Ben.
There's 3 of us. We could sing that song.
Two can be as bad as 1. There's loneliest number except the number 1.
Oh, it's only a number. It's the number 1.
All right. This is This one didn't even start on the rails. That's okay.
I get to be the guy with the mustache. I don't have a mustache.
Well,
oh no, you're right. All right, you're the guy. He was the lead singer. That's gonna be your. All right, you're star.
Sorry, I got the mustache.
All right. Does the species of wood determine how short or long of a tenon you can use to maintain in structural integrity and usability of a project? For instance, I would feel much more confident with a shorter tenon in oak than I would in cedar or sugar pine. I also had similar thoughts on the overall thickness of the tenon. Thoughts, reactions, ponderings, musings, unrelated banter. Thank you, Justin, for giving us that one. Spurred on by thinking of said question. All are welcome. Thanks. Okay, so mortise and let's start with mortise and tenon length.
Okay.
What is that going to be? See, to me, it's less about the wood and how the tenon is used, right?
Well, I think it's mortise and tenon width. That is the height of the mortise. So the taller it is, the stronger it is. So if you have, this is straight from Hoadley. You take a 1x1 and it has a certain amount of bending strength. You can push on it and see how much it bends. And if you put another 1x1 next to it and glue them together, now it's going to be twice as strong. But if you turn it on edge, that 2-inch is now 4 times as strong. When it's sitting flat, it's twice as strong, and it goes up on edge, which is why they make those I-beams now out of OSB and, grooved chunks of wood. So I think it's the height of the mortise, and that increases your gluing surface, and that's really the key. I don't think it's the species of wood that matters. The depth matters up to a certain point, but past, 3/4 of an inch or an inch, I don't know how much you're gaining. The question is, how much are you losing by mortising deeper? I think that's always the balance. So you're cutting a hole in a piece of wood and you're weakening it. Well, I'm filling it with a tenon. Yes, but, you see these joints with the 4 fingers, and there's a slot tenon one way and another slot tenon the other way.
Yeah.
And they look really cool, but I think they're a bad idea because you've removed so much material that things get weak, and glue doesn't hold forever. So, my feeling is up to a certain depth, you're good. Just make it taller.
Yeah, I would agree with Gary. I think you could navel gaze about, tenon length and thicknesses and widths and all that other stuff. But ultimately, whenever I'm designing a joint, I want to make sure that I get as much long grain to long grain glue surface as I physically can. And if that means like haunching something or doing something that is going to give me that depth, I really don't care about. If I'm being honest, I did a table one time that was a veneered construction, and I basically did floating tenons, and there was like a rounded panel or a curved panel, and then the apron went into the curved area, but it was 7/8 of an inch thick. So I didn't want through mortises because it was kind of like a sort of more modern piece. I didn't want the joinery showing. And so I literally had maybe 3/4 of an inch of a tenon on this thing. It was like almost a stub tenon, but I did it the full length of the piece so that I could make sure that I was getting maximum glue joint. So I think that's more important. As far as the species and stuff goes, again, you can look at Hoadley and he can tell you about all the different, like how much strength a piece of pine has versus a piece of maple or sapele or whatever. But I think the reality is that those numbers are sort of like off the chart of sort of functionality, in the sense that like how much force are you actually putting on any sort of joint. So like for a table, for example, most of the force is coming straight down. The table legs don't often get a beating unless you have somebody who's a little bit overzealous with the vacuum, right? They don't get a lot of force. But a chair, on the other hand, people are always leaning back in the chair or coming up on the 2 legs and all that other stuff. So that require, you know what I mean? So I think the two things are always go with as much tenon as you can from top to bottom and consider what the piece is going to be used for. In the case of a bookshelf, it's pretty static. There's not a lot of forces that are being exerted on this thing other than just sheer weight sitting on it. And if, I'm like Gary, I'm not quite sure I understand what this piece looks like. But, you use the shoulders where the shoulders are good for, bolstering strength and things like that. But yeah, I don't think, and tenon thickness is another thing that people get hung up on. I would rather do 2 thin tenons than 1 big thick one. Because if you can fit, like, let's say these are like big table aprons or something going into a leg, I'd rather see 2 thin tenons than 1 big fat one. Because by doing the 2 thin ones, because you got double the glue surface. Yeah, you got double the glue surface. And you don't gain any strength at all by having a big fat tenon in there. Like, that doesn't do anything for you.
Right.
I think for me, when I think about this question, it's more about, and I'm going to re-say something that you stated, but more about the function of that joint. So if this is, let's say this stanchion design has cantilevered sections going on, and he's got like corbel kind of triangular corbels holding things up. The majority of the pressure is going to be trying to pull one joint out and away and push the other joint down at the bottom. So if you like that top joint, you might want to make that a little bit wider, give yourself a little bit more glue surface. The bottom joint is probably going to be in compression the whole time and is less likely to do anything if gravity is working in your favor. Right. So it always, I don't think there's a one size fits all answer. You want, and I'll post some links, Justin, to joint tests that we've had done in laboratories and all that jazz. But I think that a well-fitting joint is most important, right, Gary?
Yeah, I would avoid the draw boring too. I mean, it's extra work. It's extra work, and you're not getting anything, and not in dry wood. Green wood, yeah. If you've got something you want to pin. I did a draw board joint. I still have the pin I used to draw that joint together. If you need to borrow it, Vic, come on over. I've still got it.
Perfect.
And I draw board these, my first mortise and tenons, and I was like, what's really going on here? Because I think the holes are offset, just 32nd of an inch. It's just going to stretch the hole. That's all it does. It doesn't really pull it in much tighter. If you have clamps or string, as we'll get to perhaps later in podcasts, then you're going to pull it in. It's going to be as tight as it needs to be. I've never had a problem with the joint, with the shoulder pulling away, and I don't glue my shoulder. I've never had a problem with that pulling away. Draw boring might prevent that. It's a lot of work and not worth it.
I know some people, if Justin's worried about tenon length, you might not want to draw board because your tenon length, if you don't have enough depth to whatever to get a full length tenon, there's a good chance you're going to draw bore away a significant portion of that tenon, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't think draw boring is always going to make something stronger. What do you think, Vic?
Oh yeah, no, it definitely doesn't. And even when you see these joints deconstructed and stuff, like Gary's right. I mean, you end up with an elongated hole, which is great. And I think if you're looking at like Gary was saying, green woodworking, yes, a draw-borne tenon makes perfect sense in timber framing, right? They would use a softwood for the joinery, and then they would be splitting out, riving out white oak pegs, and that's what they would be pulling the entire joint together, because you can't put a Bessie on it. Right? You can't do it. The one advantage a draw bore would give you is that if you didn't want to clamp it up, then that's great. The draw bore will hold it together whilst the glue dries, and then you're good to go. But I don't know. I don't draw bore tenons. It's just not something that I ever got into doing. I think pinning a joint can perhaps offer you some strength, or maybe a decorative element, right? Like you'll see like a lot of shaker stuff, you know what I mean, where they've done like frame and panel and they put like a couple of pins in and it looks nice and it's just that little bit of sort of contrast or whatever. I think that's nice. I think that, but I mean, as far as functionality goes, I mean, you know, if they build cope and stick doors and they hold together just fine without any, you know, pins or anything like that, I think you're probably fine without them.
Yeah. Yeah. I use pins all the time. But they're not drawboard. I just drill a hole and drive my pin in. But usually I'm doing something decorative over the top of the pin. So they're not integral pins. I did that once on a table. I think it was for a fine woodworking article I did on a green and green style table. And I made, 3-inch square, 1-inch long pins of ebony. And, so you make them square and then you got to round the bottom and drive them in, and I'm driving them in going, this is really dumb. This is really dumb. I'm never doing this again.
Yeah.
It's a waste of ebony, number one. And number two, it's kind of hard to do. It just takes time. So, and then, I don't know how many, there were 2,000 square plugs on that table. So driving a pin and then putting a square plug over it, boom, you're done.
Yep.
Quarter inch of ebony and you're done. Pinning the joint, I think, is fine. I've read some research on pins causing problems. You'll get splitting there. And I say, I'll be dead.
Somebody else's problem.
I'm not going to worry about a round pin. Yeah. I'll tell you something, though. And this, I've been doing things the same way for a long time, but I have thought, I've had two pieces break of mine that came back to me for repair. And one was a knife hinge issue, and that was my bad. I didn't give us enough swing, and it opened 140 degrees, but not 180, and someone hit the door when it was open, and it busted out the front of the mortise for the knife hinge. That was my bad. The other was a mortise and tenon piece in sort of a bridge construction. So there were two legs, but they were off the ground, and there were feet coming off of these legs. And I always thought that the feet would be the problem. And somebody fell on the table in the middle of the night and broke the joints. And they all broke at the tenons, but at the corner of the mortise, that's where they broke. And it makes me think that I should just do round mortise and never square another mortise off ever again. Because all that force gets, when you look at an airplane wing, what do? They drill a hole at the bottom of the crack. They don't square something out, right? They drill a hole at the bottom of the crack to spread that pressure out over a larger area. So, I tend to agree with you, Gary. I think like whenever I think of like failure and stuff too, it always happens at the corner because you've got this, it's like a natural spot for it to split. Yeah. Whereas with a rounded, like something that's been done with a router or some type of circular cutter, you won't run into that problem. Yeah. And if you're concerned about the traditionality of the piece, is it, I mean, if you're worried about a certain aesthetic or whatever, I suppose it's an issue. But yeah, well, if you're taking your tenons through, you may want to square them up, but most of mine. Well, not all of them, but that one's a toss-up. But so you could use the domino, I suppose. I think an integral tenon is stronger, but that's another topic. Oh yeah, that's a whole other kettle of fish.
Listen,
but
it's really agreeing on one controversial subject, rounding or squaring off. Let's not open up a whole nother can.
That's right.
In my building at the old studio, I would look up at the trusses, and they were old. They were 100 years old, and there was a bird's mouth coming down one support piece, and they cut a notch out of the truss, and there were 14 trusses, and maybe 3 of them had a crack at that bird's mouth. So it's not, given that you're always going to get a crack where there's a square corner, but that's where they do tend to show up over time.
absolutely.
In 100 years. So yeah, there's take it easy on yourself, Justin.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Take it easy. The problem, if the bookcase is attached to the wall, most of your issues are gone. There's only two things that we have trouble with, that our furniture has trouble with over time: moisture, or the lack of moisture, and the furniture mover.
Yep.
That's it. And the rest of the time, it just sits there. I mean, Vic is absolutely right about chairs, because you tip back, and, my office chair, my other office is just doweled together and it's ready to fall apart, but dowels are long enough. It's kind of still holding. But chairs go under a lot of abuse. Table just sits there until the furniture mover bangs a leg into a corner.
Or drops it off the back of a liftgate truck.
I fixed a Jeff Miller stool, solid maple, that someone had brought from Chicago, and they'd had it built by Jeff. And then they just dropped it off the back of the truck.
Oh.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Does Jeff know?
Yeah, I told him.
All right, let's see. Let's go to the string question, since you've already hinted at it.
Yeah.
And I think it'll fit in with the time. This question is from Devin. In the past, I have heard many a Shop Talk Live host recommend one or another aspect of Japanese woodworking techniques. Laminated chisels, pole saws, wooden planes have all made the list. One thing I've not heard about is using cord or rope as a way of clamping mitered boxes and drawers. Has anyone had experience with this method? I've only ever seen it mentioned in Japanese cabinet makers. Basically, the craftsperson takes a long length of twine or cord and wraps it many times around a glue up, ties a quick knot, and sets it aside. No fussy bar clamps, no marring ratchet straps, no slipping corner clamps. I've tried it on some boxes using paracord with great success. Any reason more people do not use or talk about this option? And he sent us a video of it, and I was originally not going to share the video because I thought it was stolen content. Because it was like some channel called like Woodworking Enthusiasts or something like that. I was like waiting for a 16,000 plans promo, but it looks legit. So I will share it on the website. I apologize, Devin, for doubting your respect for intellectual property. But okay, so Gary, you seem excited about this notion.
Well, I looked at the video. And since listeners will have the opportunity to check it out, they will see that there are bar clamps in use in the building of that cabinet. So,
well, not in that specific part with a
not on that
drawer.
Part.
Yeah.
It's an okay method. I use it in repair all the time, particularly in chair repair. A rung will break, and you're going to cut out the rung, and then what? You're going to try and spread the legs and fit it back in. And I've used a scarf joint, or I've just found all the pieces. I had a friend who was a furniture mover, and he would just bring me 15 pieces and say, here, put this back together, which was a lot of fun. But you couldn't get a clamp on some stuff, but you could get cord on it, and you could wrap the cord, and you wrap a cord 20 times around your finger, you start to go, wait a second, this is getting pretty tight on me. So it absolutely works. But I use it in situations, A, where I'm using hide glue, and B, where I can't use a clamp.
Hide glue because it's giving you, like liquid hide glue because it's giving you time, or?
Yeah, it gives you good tack.
Okay.
Also time, but good tack. I mean, type on will work, but sometimes, gravity takes over. So hide glue will give you better tack. And so, and you don't always need glue. A rub joint is just that, hide glue. But he was gluing a drawer, I think, which I thought was an odd construction technique to use twine on that. But easy to clamp the corners if you needed to pull it square.
So it was a mitered drawer, which I thought was odd.
Yeah.
But then the bottom was applied to the bottom. So
Yeah.
Here's one thing that made me think, okay, wood movement, maybe it's perfectly quarter stone stock, whatever. I'm not going to argue. This is a case where you're able to square it up a little bit after the fact when applying to that bottom, right? So maybe with a box, you might not have that chance. I don't know. But then I went really deep and I noticed that he used, it wasn't cord or twine. It was, what is it called?
Paracord?
Nope. It is,
a Japanese bamboo twine of some sort.
It was twill tape. Okay. So twill tape, I have seen it used in lutherie when they apply a binding around the edge, and you've got all sorts of weird curves, and you got to get the pressure just right. They will tape the binding on and then wrap the whole thing in twill tape.
What's twill tape?
Twill tape. Oh, you came to the right spot. Twill tape is, I asked my wife, the weaver, and twill is a weave structure to fabric. And twill tape is, if it's 3/4 inch wide twill tape, it is woven 3/4 of an inch wide. So there's no folding over, there's no hems or anything like that. It's a particular weave structure. When I asked her what twill weave like what an example of it was, she started to break out a book. And I said, no, what? She goes, jeans, denim is twill. So it's a not very stretchy fiber.
So that's the stuff that they use sometimes for weaving seats and stuff then.
It would probably be similar to, like a shaker tape might be a twill tape. Now I gotta go ask her that. But it's woven that way. So there is no bulk to the piece. It is of uniform thickness, and it's probably not going to have that much give to it. So,
and I think it's great for small glue ups where you can't get a clamp on stuff. That's my take on it. That I'm going to use a clamp 99 times out of 100.
Yeah, I got to agree with Gary. Like, I've used surgical tubing before, because surgical tubing, you have the ability to create some tension. And I've used that on, and again, in a situation where like putting on a clamp was just going to be a nightmare, where you would have to come up with some crazy calls or, or if you had to like overlap clamps in a certain way and you weren't going to get the clamping pressure where you wanted. So for me, the surgical tubing works great. You can buy it in like lengths of like 25 feet and you just keep wrapping and wrapping and wrapping. I think, like I've seen the Japanese videos where they'll use like this like hemp rope and then they'll use some sort of like a stick as a windlass and they'll basically wind it up and tighten it all up. And I think it's romantic. I don't think it's practical. I think it's cool that you can use a length of rope as a clamp. But I'm gonna use a clamp, like Gary said, 99.8% of the time because it makes the most amount of sense.
Yeah.
But totally valid.
In repair work, cord is great.
Oh, for sure.
I had a couple, they were in the military in the South Pacific, and they had bought these carved fish, big fish, like whales, and they were all on their mantelpiece, and there was somebody working on the outside of the house, banging on the, repairing something, and they knocked all these carvings off the mantle and they cracked on the floor. So they just brought me all the pieces, and I went, cool. So, just had to figure out how to get my fish set up just right, hide glue, and then wrap it with cord whenever I could. And if you can't, there's always tape.
Yeah, I was going to say like that flat twine that you use like to like bundle parts together and stuff, it can be useful as well for clamping.
Yeah.
I've never tried that. And Caleb James one time said that he takes that flat twine, that cellophane or whatever, and unspools a lot of it and then wraps it and makes a rope out of it. And you've got that very, very straight. Have you tried that too, or?
I haven't.
Yeah.
No. I always get frustrated when it turns into a long string.
Yeah,
rope.
I know.
It's like, damn it, I want it like this wide.
I use, I have some very, very long, like 15-foot long rubber bands that I'll use, and I will use a bicycle inner tube that I've cut into strips for clamping odd curvy bits. But on a box, I just don't see how it's going to be simpler.
Yeah,
if you don't have clamps, you don't have clamps, though. So, woo.
I tell you another method. Another method to consider is gluing something up on a platform where you can add wedges to the platform.
Yes.
So you've got things stapled or screwed to the outside, and then you can add wedges, folding wedges, 2 wedges to push against the sides. I would think about that before I would go to twine, but
or just draw bore everything, right?
I draw board my miters together.
That's right. Never underestimate the power of a well-placed pocket hole screw.
Hey, sometimes that's the right way to go.
Absolutely.
I agree 100%.
It's the right way to go. I did a big church job about 10 years ago, and they wanted this. I had to build a short wall, about a 4-foot high wall to cover this concrete dais. And I was like, well, how am I going to attach this? I can't clamp this. And it was, 8 feet long, and there was a corner, and I was like, well, I could use pocket screws. And it was great.
Yeah.
And I just don't worry about it. There was Yeah,
because I was cheap and I want to reuse them.
Save the screws.
But I would clamp the panels up with the 2 clamps I had, and then pocket screw everything together, and then let the glue dry, and boom.
It really does lend itself to this discussion about what kind of woodworking do you want to do, and it changes as soon as you have a client. You're not using twine then. And it's a very, as to use Vic's word, romantic notion to be, wrapping rope, and it's nice and it's quiet. And my glue ups are a little noisier than that. There's somebody talking the whole time that glue up is happening. Can I tell you a quick story? I'm working on this project, and it's a small bookcase, and this was like the very first online class we did. And so I'm rushing around, and I set it on my bench, and it falls off the bed. And I pick it up and I go, oh, no harm done. And I just keep on going. Some months go by before I'm gluing the piece up. And I glue it, it was through tenons and wedges in the tenons and all that. So I said, I'll do 1/2 at a side. And I got 1/2 glued up. It was great. And I'm doing the other half. And as soon as I start tapping it on with my mallet, it splits in 2.
In front of people.
No, it's just, I was on my own. No, I wasn't doing a class. That would have been a disaster, because a student walked in at the time, and he knew me, and I was just screaming my head off. I used a word or 2, and I got it together, but it was just so tension filled. Glue changes everything.
Yeah.
This really does. And then, I got the piece together, and I added some butterfly keys, and everything's fine. But yeah, it can be really stressful. And so that, depending on what you're doing, if you want to use quiet tools, that's great. If you want to use noisy ones, that's great. Depends on what you're after and what your purpose is.
And if part of the process of woodworking involves using twine as a clamp, and that's what gets you excited about woodworking, go for it.
Yeah.
But don't think that it's going to be like more efficient or better or anything like that.
Yeah, and notice that in that video, the Japanese cabinet makers were using bar clamps to glue up panels, and although I do have, I have a dog. It looks
a pinch dog.
A pinch dog, which is what they used to use. They would drive those in to glue up boards. I thought, oh, that's interesting. So yeah, there's all sorts of ways of doing this stuff. one of the fallacies is that everyone, I think, has to a certain extent is, oh yeah, that's Vic's technique for gluing up a panel. Well, no, the Egyptians probably about 4th century BC were doing it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
This stuff's been around forever. Oh, well, this gilding technique is so new. Nah, not really.
There's nothing new.
There's nothing new. Yeah, really, there's nothing new. We just, some new takes on things.
Well, and another aspect too, just to complicate that, you don't know if they just used all the clamps that day. and because or I've been in situations where I'm applying 15 pounds of clamps to a 3-ounce piece of wood, and all of a sudden I'm afraid to pick the thing up because I know it's going to break because the weight of the clamps is going to be a problem. So there's so many different reasons to use different techniques but if you're in a bind and you got some rope.
If you're in a bind. Well done.
I just set you up there. Yeah. Yep. But everything works. Everything works and nothing works sometimes.
Well, the best advice is practice your glue ups. And if the clamps don't work and the rope doesn't work, well, you got to come up with something else. Maybe it's packing tape on it. It's not something that I use very often. Other people do and like it. So find what works for you. There's lots of ways of doing this stuff.
All right, let's take a quick break. This episode is brought to you by Shaper Tools, makers of Shaper Origin, the handheld CNC router that brings digital precision to the craft of woodworking. With Origin, traditional workflows become easier and more reliable. Tackle joinery, cabinetry, hardware installation, and more with speed and precision. Try it risk-free in your shop for 30 days. Visit shapertools.com/fine woodworking to learn more. So, does anyone have all-time favorite tool of all time for this week? Technique of all time for this week? Smooth moves? Anything?
I do.
Gary?
Yeah.
Vic, do you want to go first?
Sure.
What you got, Vic?
So my favorite tool of all time, which is actually sort of a technique as well, is jigs. And so I was telling Ben, Gary, before you had joined us about how my last couple of days have just been really frustrating installing a new sink, set of faucets in the kitchen. And whoever built this island did not think that a large mammal was going to be underneath that sink trying to, and so one of the things that had come up is that's one of these situations where, how nowadays they just drill one single hole in for a sink and then they use the little lever type. Mm-hmm. Well, I had a 3-hole setup. So your faucet plus your two controls. And in order to retrofit it, or to bring it up to like this standard, the holes that had been drilled for the water controls were like maybe a 1/2 inch big, but for this new template, it needed to be 1 inch. And so again, my shop is all in totes, all in, like I got nothing, right? I've got my bucket buddy that I carry around in my house that I do all home repair with and all that other stuff. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, how do I make a 1/2 inch hole into a 1 inch hole with the tools that I have at my disposal, right? You can't take the countertop over to the drill press, right? You can't, So I made a little jig where basically I took a 1 inch hole saw and I drilled a 1 inch hole, very sort of strategically placed. And then I drilled 2 screw holes. And then I basically took that because it's going to be all covered by an escutcheon plate. Mm-hmm. And so I basically screwed the jig to the countertop, put the hole saw back into the hole, and then just let it guide itself in.
Nice.
And so, well, thank you. I can't take full credit for that. I did do a little bit of internet research thinking, how am I going to do this?
Because you don't have the pilot hole, yeah.
Because I don't have the pilot hole. And so what you can't, if you make a mistake and you like, let's say you use a hole saw to drill a 1-inch hole, and then you got to do 1.5 inches, you just take the plug that you cut from the 1 inch and then use that as your sort of pilot. Right. But anyway, so like the I think my favorite technique / tool of all time is building little one-off jigs that, like some people build jigs and they build them out of beautiful plywoods and they date them and sign them and like they're these beautiful things. I don't do that. My jigs are ugly. They're made out of the like garbage wood that I can find, and I use them once and then I toss them. And like I find that those are the best ones because they're made specific for the job and they do exactly what you want them to do.
And so they're quick.
Very quick. It took me like 5 minutes to bang this little jig out.
Yep.
And I placed the hole specifically so that I could take the jig, drill one hole, and then flip it end for end because I was referencing off of the sink, edge of the sink, right? Because that's all I had is a straight edge there. And then use the same drill holes. So now there's 3 big holes and 4 little ones from that all get covered by the escutcheon plate.
And escutcheon is one of my favorite words.
It is a fun word, isn't it? Escutcheon.
Isn't that not the most fun word to say?
Escutcheon. It is. It really is. It's next only to chatoyance.
So I have a favorite tool / technique, and I'm actually, for the video audience, I'm going to turn on this. There we go. In the back, you can see I just have a piece of plywood screwed to the side of my bench, and then a piece of wood on top of it at a 90. And there is a piece of plywood on top of that. But basically, I screwed this piece of plywood to the side of my bench to use for making tenons on the end of a longer piece of wood, and I just wanted to be able to clamp a long piece of wood securely on this and have a platform for using a template bit and a tenon template. And that piece of wood will stay. I am in love with a 4-foot bench height. It has become my primary working surface. I wound up putting a piece of melamine on top of it so it's a larger surface, and now I've got a light that goes right there. And last night I was fret sawing out marquetry, and it was right there. I could see perfectly. I was doing little teeny tiny inlay fills the other night, and I just right there. 4-foot bench height is where it's at, folks. You heard it here first.
Well, actually, you didn't, because I think, like you look at the joinery bench, right? That Jim Tolpin wrote about in the new Traditional Woodworker.
Oh.
Right? He had a bench that was like up to his elbow. And across the front of it was was one of those chain vices.
Twin screw thing?
Yeah, that's it. And basically his idea is that you have this bench that's like 2 feet by 2 feet with a 2-foot wide vise on the front. You can dovetail all day long, and it's at a great height, similar to like a Moxon, right? A Moxon brings the work up. Right. Well, and that's what this did. So, I mean, most people don't, well, I mean, I won't say most people, but I think a lot of people don't have room for 2 benches in their shop. But if you do, having something at that height is very, very handy.
Well, and there's, the Steve Latta bench on bench. Jeff Miller had a bench on bench for us. I'm sure a lot of people have made benches on bench. This one, though, is just a piece of plywood, and I love it. It is... And also you can clamp things to the side of it just with F clamps. It's just super versatile for me right now. And
that needs to be a fine woodworking video, I think, for Instagram or something. I think people would get a real kick out of seeing how you use that.
Actually, you know what? I have started doing like a little video shot of every little scenario I've been using it in, just because it really is like, I'll do a reel or something at some point on Instagram for it. But yeah, just And I think it helps that I'm super not precious with any of my benches. So I can just screw into the side of it. I don't give a dang. I will just whatever. It doesn't matter to me.
That's some salty language, Ben Strano. You just take it easy.
Dang.
Here's Gary Rogowski and I doing everything we possibly can not to drop the F-bomb.
I already have to bleep one of Gary.
Oops.
There was an episode not long ago I had to bleep Anissa twice though. So
whoa,
I know. Something. Yeah. All right, Gary, do you have an all-time favorite or a smooth move or something?
My all-time favorite tool is my 1/2-inch chisel.
That sounds like an all-time favorite tool.
All time. I use it for so much stuff. I just used it yesterday. I built this little box, I guess a little wedding present for some people. I don't know terribly well, but I'm going to not come empty-handed. And I had this box built for some other purpose, and I finished it up. And I was going to put this lid on it, and I thought, well, let's just carve something. And I ended up carving everything with the chisel, and it's just that little.
Oh yeah, just a little diamond
basket weave.
Yeah. Very cool.
It's just fun.
Yeah,
and I had so much fun with it, and because I was thinking I was going to put in pin hinged lids, and there were going to be 2, and then I needed handles, and then I needed to stop, and I'm like, well, this is turning into an ordeal. I could carve it, and I like doing that. And so I was able to, I did leaves on the other side, which I mostly cleaned up with my 1/4-inch chisel. But
nice.
That's a good exercise right there. Is like, what carving can you do with a 1/2-inch chisel?
Yeah, there's a surprising amount.
Yeah,
and it was fun, and I really enjoyed doing it. And I went, perfect. Everyone's happy. They will love the box or not. I don't care. Whatever. It's a box. And I hope they do, because I'd like it around. Anyway, my 1/2-inch chisel is I actually have, I think, about 6 or 8 things that I do with my 1/2-inch chisel on a regular basis that you go, oh, like cleaning up curves.
Mm-hmm.
So like on a cloud rise, like on a green and green cloud rise, you have that. Well, you have 2 arcs, and one's easy to get to because it's convex. But the concave one, oftentimes you do it with a router or you do it with the sander, and you got to clean that up. And you can take your 1/2-inch chisel and bevel side up and just kind of scrape it along that curve, kind of pivoting off that top curve, off the top convex arc. And it works surprisingly well just to clean up, particularly sandy mark. And then you come back and finish it up.
Yeah, I think that's an article. That's an article right there.
No, I actually wrote
chisel tricks.
I actually wrote 1/2-inch chisel article.
Yeah, it's and this basket weave pattern.
Yeah,
I saw it in again, nothing new. 20 years ago in a East Side New York apartment that I had rented for a trip. And there on the newel post was this basket weave. I think it was bigger than a 4. I think it may have been a 6 square pattern. And I have my students do this. I have them do a 4, so that's 16 squares, which is cruel and unusual, but I'm like that.
It's good.
No, it's so good for their dovetail work, because they're just, cleaning it up and going, oh, I have to make this bigger. Because in carving, there are no mistakes.
Right.
Only opportunities.
Well, and the nice thing about that too is that, like, and you probably see this a lot, Gary, when you're teaching, like some people come to holding a chisel, pretty easily, but other people really struggle with how to hold the chisel, like just like they're either like with an all-around kung fu grip, or they're like, you can just see that they're awkward with it. And this kind of shows them that there's no right way to hold the chisel. There's just the correct way to hold the chisel for whatever task you're doing.
Yeah, there are many ways. There really are many ways. And you have to, so carving those leaves, I was up at a really steep angle to get around that curve. So it's kind of fun. The only thing you pay attention to when you're working with a chisel is stay behind the business end.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put my hand here to hold this. No.
I tell my students there's one rule that I have in woodworking, and that is no meat in front of the blade.
Yeah.
I don't care what blade it is, plain blade, chisel, bandsaw, no meat.
I swear to God, I was chopping out a mortise. Bang, clean it up. Bang, bang, and I had a lot of mortises to clean up. And I don't know, at some point, this hand was here, and I took my chisel and just went, why did I do that? I just poked myself. Well, I was in front. It's just, we do some repetitive tasks after a while. Have you ever hallucinated on the bandsaw? Which is probably another segment. But,
that's part of your book, isn't it?
I have, and it's fascinating. But things, if you stay at one task for too long, you go brain dead. And so you just have to develop these habits. And I poked myself. I was like, all right, I'm always keeping both hands behind the business edge.
I prefer to call it meditating.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're at the bandsaw and you're resawing and you're resawing and you're resawing and you're resawing, like I realized that like a foot of that board went by without any input from me. Like I was somewhere else. It's just like
the problem is when it's going so well, that's when you speed up.
Yeah.
That's always a mistake.
That's always a mistake.
The blade is not getting sharper in use.
No. It's just finding an easier course to go through.
That's what SawStop should do next.
What's that?
Bandsaw?
Figure out a way to sharpen the blade after it goes through the cut. That would be brilliant. That would be brilliant. Ooh,
I'd pay for that.
I would pay for it too.
Yeah, you would.
Absolutely. I ended up getting a carbide tip blade for my big bandsaw, and it was absolutely worth the $250.
Is that the 36-inch you were talking about?
The 36-inch, yeah. It was just huge.
I've always thought those things, like those carbide tip blades, like if you were doing like a bunch of resaw work and stuff, like they would just be bee's knees.
I had one on my Laguna, but it just blew apart after a couple of cuts. I'm like, come on. So I don't know what the story was on that, whether it was tension or what. But this was, I don't know, just standard issue. It may have been I'm not sure if it was a Starrett or a Lennox blade. I don't know. I don't know what it was, but yeah, carbide tipped. And then I would come back and clean it every once in a while, or have the student who just ran a whole bunch of cedar through, or pine or something really pitchy, and just clean it.
Yep.
Get some orange citrus and a toothbrush and meditate.
That's right. That's right.
Meditate. Yeah, a lot of teeth to clean, buddy.
It's like a rosary.
True enough.
Woodworker's rosary.
Yeah. But yeah, on the bandsaw, it's actually an optical illusion. Something about your eyesight. But I have a plywood fence, and you'd see the plies moving back and forth.
Oh no!
And you go, God, I am not stoned. I know I'm not stoned.
I gotta take a break.
Yeah, that's really it.
Yeah,
that's really it. And it's, if you're not on a machine that has a brake on it, like the SawStop, it's dangerous.
Oh, yeah,
so
definitely.
every once in a while you do it.
It's dangerous with it. Yeah.
Lull you to sleep. They do lull you to sleep.
All right, we've got time for one more question. This one's from Zachary. I was able to purchase 2 Sapele boards, one genuine teak board for about 30% of what I would have paid at my local hardwood dealer. The boards are 10 foot long, 8-quarter kiln dried stock. One of the Sapele boards is 11.5 inches wide. It's a huge board. And the other is a beautiful ribbon figure with 6 inches wide. The teak board is also 6 inches wide. Being new and still getting a handle on my skills, I'm admittedly a bit intimidated by these boards. I want to do them justice. Question 1. When you were starting out, were you ever intimidated by a gorgeous or expensive piece of wood? Everyone can agree. Yes?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Still have that piece.
Yeah. Same. It's a piece of Swiss pear.
Okay. This is a little frightening. Sorry. Zachary, you're screwed. You're carrying these around for the rest of your life.
You are.
I'm planning on stowing these away until I feel my skills can do these works of nature justice. Question 2, do you ever put wood away and keep it for that one special project you don't know what it is yet? Yes, we obviously know that.
Go back to the original question.
And this one, question 3, I don't think we could really answer, but what do you think would be the best way to employ the sapele? I was thinking shops on veneers. Always a good answer if you can.
Yeah, if you can
do it well.
Can veneer, sure.
4 is where I think it gets juicy for me. What are your thoughts on the right length of boards for storage? I'd really like to cut them down to 8 foot at least, but 10-foot long pieces of 8/4 sapele and teak don't come along every day. I've heard Mike say in the past he doesn't see a reason to keep anything longer than 8-foot board, and that's for a table. So, we all agree there is a board that you're just not going to touch. Ironically, mine is a really nice piece of wide white pine.
Oh, nice.
Like 6/4 wide white pine. I just don't know what to do with it, but I love it. And there it will stay.
Yeah.
Make a seat.
Yeah, that's what I'll have.
That's really.
What's yours, Gary?
Let's see. I have a piece of figured redwood I got at someone's garage sale from their attic. And I glued it together and stared at it for these 30 years. Waiting. I'm sure the project's going to come along. But yeah, there's so many pieces I have. Yeah. It's a sickness.
What's
it's a piece of Swiss pear.
Oh, you said that, yeah.
Yeah. I had there was a piece at Rosewood when I was a student, and it was just beautiful, so I bought it. And I still have it.
Yeah. I had some elm that someone was going to cut up into laminates for a bending project. I said, no, you can't do it. And I hung on to those for years. I finally sold them. I just couldn't do it. I just had a certain point. I have to say, I'm not, if I haven't done anything with it by now, I'm probably not going to.
But that redwood.
Use the wood. Yeah, I have a project for the redwood in mind now.
Okay.
But use the wood. Buy it if it's gorgeous, because you won't see it again at the lumberyard.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go back. I tell my students, no, don't expect to see it again.
Yeah, it's gone.
Roy Underhill came out to my studio some years ago and taught a class, and he wanted to build these foot treadle lathes out of southern yellow pine. And I went to the lumberyard, the wholesale yard, and got a full 2-inch, a full 12 inches wide, and they were 10-footers. And I bought enough for the project, and I went, I'm never going to see that again. And I went back and bought the rest of their stock. And when I pulled out of the lot, the guys were looking at my little Mazda pickup truck going, you sure you're going to make it? And I said, I'll be fine. And just cruising down the road with my butt dragging. But it was worth it. That stuff is gorgeous.
I love southern yellow pine.
It's gorgeous. Brutal on your tools.
I miss living in the South where you could just go to Home Depot and get construction grade lumber and pick it well. And, but Baltic birch, there was a while where I was buying, and I recently up here, there's somebody had a stash, a lumberyard that posted, we've got a supply of Baltic birch. It's like $170 for a 3/4 inch piece. And my wife said, she's like, go get some. And I said, no, I can't. I already have 3 pieces. I'm just not touching already, just because we'll never see it again, probably, unfortunately. So,
wow.
And the other part of this question that gives me pause is the 10-foot length of these boards, and should I cut them? And I actually had a minor panic attack at the suggestion. So don't cut those.
I disagree.
I'm like, okay, so here's what happens, right? So you got these beautiful sapele boards, and let's say you need 5 feet of it, right? If you chop these boards down from 10 feet to 8 feet, First of all, what are you going to do with a 2-foot piece? Nothing. Then if you have the full length and you cut it at 5 feet, then you have another 5 feet. 5 feet is especially with 8-quarter material, like you can do an awful lot with 5 feet of 8-quarter material. You can build an entire side table. And so, the one thing I remember reading, I think it was in one of James Krenov's books or whatever, is like, you can rip boards too thin and add boards to it to make it wider and stuff. But once you make the crosscut, that's it. That's final. You cannot easily or effectively add length to a board. So I'm not suggesting that a person needs, what are they, 10 feet? As he said, You don't need 10 feet of anything, because the reality is that, unless you're building beds or whatever, you're not going to use 10 feet long anything. But to cut it arbitrarily, just for the sake of making storage easier, that I couldn't do it.
I would have a hard time finding a place to store 10-footers. So I think I would cut 6 and 4, or 6.5 and 3.5.
That's
now,
arbitrary.
wait a second. Now I got to chime in here. I've been listening to this stuff and saying, okay, well, Ben's going to be reasonable. No, 6 and a 4? What are you, nuts?
It's true. Those are arbitrary numbers, Ben.
Wow.
No, because I figure 6 foot, you could still get a dining room table out of it.
Yeah.
And the 3-foot sections, your legs stock.
Yeah.
I think 6 foot gives you way more options than 5.
Yeah.
I'm saying don't cut it at all.
Cut
it when you need it.
If you gotta
cut it, I'm cutting 2 feet off, and I'm building a box or a chest.
I can see that. Yeah.
Okay.
And now I've got an 8-footer. I can fit in this. If I need 4s, I got 2 4s because it's 8'1", or I've cut off the ends to make sure the checking is not going in too deep. But I want that 2-footer. I'll do something with it. I know.
What about if matching side tables comes up? And you get cut that right in half and get 2 beautiful matching out of the same board.
But these are made up projects. Like this
if
is
it comes
like,
up, but if it doesn't come up,
what if somebody comes along and says, "I'll give you $1 million for a 9-foot board"? Then it's just like there's so many scenarios that we could come up with.
That's an easy fix. I have that board, but I have to add breadboard ends to it.
Right, to keep it straight.
And I can actually these 2 foot wide breadboard ends will make this table 11 feet long. It's great.
I don't know. I think if you have those boards, like obviously he sort of came about them. He didn't go out looking for them. They presented themselves, and then now he's got a bit of a storage issue, and so I understand that. I think to be honest, the only logical suggestion that has been brought up so far was Gary's, and it's like cut the 2 feet off and use that small piece
immediately.
Use
it for a box or use it for whatever. But the other thing he talks about is these boards are too nice to use. And I mean, you hear about this. It's like, woodworkers are, they buy stuff and they don't know what they're going to use it for. And, those boards are too nice to use, right? They're just there. Gary said it kind of in passing. He said, just use them. Use the boards.
Got to.
Get yourself to a point where you do some practice and stuff like that, right? Like I tell my students all the time, and one of the things I learned, by reading stuff by you, Gary, is like the 5-minute dovetail, right? I tell people all the time, like if you are about to embark on a killer set of dovetails for something, don't go in there cold, right? Get yourself sorted out so that you can just get your saw cutting on different angles, cutting straight, cutting plumb, do all the little bit of practice work, and then go for it, right? You can't let sort of that intimidation stop you from using a nice piece of wood to create a nice project. And so it's like, if you have, and I'm sure, Ben, you run into this all the time with like making ukuleles and various other luthiery things. I mean, you can spend hundreds of dollars on sides and backs and all this other stuff. And it's like, if you get paralyzed by the fact that this is a really beautiful piece of wood and don't use it, I don't know. I feel like you're sort of stagnating. There's something else at play there that's stopping you from doing it. And I think a lot of times with newer woodworkers, it's just lack of experience.
And if you're going to go that route, like what I'm doing right now, build 2 of something. Build one out of soft maple or a nice wood that is going to be, and that is your first run through. Yeah. You know, and then when you got your machine dialed in, like right now, my router table's been set up that way for a week and a half because I'm finishing this other thing to make sure my binding is good. And then the ukulele that has to come out right gets the whole works, you know?
Right.
But build 2 of something. If you're that worried about screwing up, give yourself an immediate dry run, you know, do the 5-minute dovetail. And then do a nice set of dovetails on maple, and then do your sapele.
When you find that sapele that's so incredible, also buy a piece of poplar that size.
Yeah.
Oh, because that would be a good analog.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember
build a prototype out of that.
Yep.
I remember going to Michael Fortune's house, and all around his dining table in his home are poplar versions of the number 1 chair, of the like all of his chairs that he's done, and he builds them out of poplar a few times to get the jig, because you know Michael, right? Everything's a jig and everything's, you know. So it's like prove the jig, prove the setups, make sure everything's good to go, and then like what do you do with these poplar chairs? Well, they become the chairs that you sit on at home because you know, not even Michael Fortune can sell a poplar chair for 10 grand. So but you know, the reality is like, build it out of something that's not dear to you, and get all your sort of like panicky bits out of there. And then if it turns out well, great, go on to the next piece. If it turns out poorly, do it again.
Yeah. Right. Otherwise you'll turn out carrying around the same piece of redwood for 30 years.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah, or Swiss pear.
And nobody wants that.
No, nobody needs that.
All right. Well, let me tell you, I moved out of the studio. It was 10,000 square feet. The basement was 5,000. So 5,000 up and down. And it was all filled with wood.
You sure?
I filled up a shipping container. I have about, not that much, about 4,000 board feet of material that I haven't touched.
Right.
And it wasn't the wood for the students. Some of it was. But, and I said, I really don't need to buy anything else. I have enough wood for the rest of my life. I should use this stuff up, because otherwise some schmo is going to come to your garage sale when you've gone, and they're going to go, oh, what is this? I bet it's it's one of those redwoods. I don't know what it is. I'll buy that. How much? $10. Great. And they take it.
Exactly.
You know what? This is real quick addition. If you're label your wood, because there was recently a forum post, you know, like who's going to take over this stuff, blah, blah, you know, what's your plan? Right. And I went to, I had a line on a luthier who had passed, and the family's trying to identify all the wood and price the wood. And he had 10 grand worth of wood that is unlabeled. Nobody knows what it is. Nobody can attest to the provenance. Nobody can. And end of the day, somebody's going to walk in and offer their family what it's worth, which is not much, because it's not labeled, you know?
Right.
And so if you've got a huge stack of wood, label it for your loved ones. Do them a favor.
Well, label it for yourself as well. I mean, there's there's
that too. Yeah.
How do you stack your wood? So I have a rack and it's horizontal. You got to label the ends, and it's smart to label the ends and put down the length so you don't dig through a pile and you end up a foot short on this piece. But it's smarter to put your wood vertically, because you're using the space in your shop that you don't walk yet. You don't walk at that height, but it's a pain to get at the board behind it. So you got to label that stuff as well. So I label the edges and I label the ends.
That's great.
That helps.
So Gary, do you have a class sign up soon?
Yes. So we have our online mastery program is going to start in October. There's just a couple of spots remaining.
October, like end of October or right now?
Oh, I think we're October 20th.
Okay. So in the middle.
Yeah.
All right. We'll post a link.
Okay.
To the studio and information on
northwestwoodworking.com. Yeah. Cool. I've got people signed up. Yeah. I've almost hit I'm trying to see about how to do a scholarship. I still haven't figured that out.
That's a hard one.
Vic, it really is.
Do you have any classes coming up, or are you just in move mode?
No, I'm in move mode. So right now, I'm still maintaining some of my private students, but we're not taking on anybody new at the moment because I need time to get into my shop and set it up and get it to where it's happy. And I'd actually like to build something. So I'm going to take some time.
So selfish.
It is selfish. Yeah.
So is this a bigger space?
No, it's smaller actually.
Have you met Vic?
Yeah, I went from a 2-car garage to a 1-car garage.
Wow.
So I've had to pare down quite a bit of stuff, but I don't own a table saw. I don't, I
was going to say, the miniaturization of machines is really something to think about. Get that little tiny table saw and a little tiny drill press.
Yeah, that's right. I'll buy everything that's Proxon. Have you ever seen that stuff? Proxon stuff. Yeah. It's like for model makers, and it's super precise, but they're like this big.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. You got to check it out.
Well, that does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Make sure you head on over to finewoodworking.com/webinars and sign up for the Panel Router webinar. They always make sure it's a good time. That's going to be October 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And if you have any questions, comments, conversation starters, this show runs off of your input. So send them into shoptalk@taunton.com. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that thumbs up button. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks for listening.
Because I consider myself to be quite hilarious.
What am I doing wrong?